Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chasing Hazel's Tales, a family history podcast. We talk family history, DNA, and anything else that comes across the desk. I'm Kim McLaughlin.
And I'm Laura Ireland.
We have a bit of news, and we're going to update you on our plan. So first things first, if you remember, Hazel is our grandmother, and she had a relationship with Gerald Humphrey, who was not our known grandfather at the time, from Gray, Maine. And that produced our dad. None of this was known to us until just recently. But because of Hazel's brother, Carl, he kept every piece of paper he put his hands on ever in his life. We have a mountain of paperwork that we continually go through, and it's an ongoing event sometimes. I'll just say, I wonder what, and I'll pull a piece of paper out, and, well, that's how we got to today. And so, but we continually go through it, and we call it the gift that keeps on giving.
For sure.
And giving.
Right. Yeah. So previously, we had shared proof in the form of letters that Carl and his fiancée, Hattie, had known about the relationship with Gerald and Hazel. And we had tidbits of proof that everyone else knew about this as well. It just seems that everyone knew except us. And maybe the Humphreys in Gray. We are still discovering who knew what and all of that kind of thing. So we just so happened to find a little booklet. I think Kim found this one. Hattie kept a honeymoon diary or honeymoon.
Yeah, it was a honeymoon booklet, kind of like a baby book. When you get a baby book, you write down all the details of what was going on in your life when you had a baby. Well, this was the same thing, except this is what we did for our marriage. You know, all the people that were there and all the people that the party or the gifts and that kind of stuff and where they went on their honeymoon.
And wouldn't you know, when she starts to write down the information about the honeymoon. So they were married on September 8th of 1934. And it starts off saying that the honeymoon started on September 9th. And their first stop was, drum roll please,
Dun, dun, dun.
Gray, Maine. Wait a minute. That sounds very familiar.
As I say, hold the phone.
Who do we know that lived in Gray at that time? Right.
Bingo.
Gerald Humphrey. So Hattie goes on to say that they stayed 2 days with some very dear friends, Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Humphrey. And yeah, so this was 1934, September of 1934. And this was a time that we knew that Hazel and Gerald had the ongoing relationship. At least because Hazel was early in the pregnancy with our father at that point.
Right. About 2 months. She'd be 2 months pregnant. Maybe she knew she's pregnant. Maybe she didn't. I don't know.
And
come on.
You know, I understand they were friends with him, but I just find this awkward, mind-blowing. I'm not really sure what, but you know, this whole thing just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I have to admit that for some weird reason, my reaction is anger.
Yeah, she was angry, people. She was pretty cross.
I'm laughing and I'm angry, but you know, it seems so obvious. Carl and Hattie had to have known all the details. They knew they were having a relationship. Hazel became pregnant, so they clearly knew all their lives.
Right, and because in 1934, this relationship had been going on for a while now. We're talking years, you know, a couple, 2 or 3 at least.
You know, I know that times were different, and I think most families tried to hide any secret that might suggest anyone lived anything other than a perfectly moral life, or almost like Victorian type thing.
Right.
You know, but as they say, it is what it is. I can't help my reaction to it, but you know, how they couldn't possibly know that all these years later, that secret would be brought right out into the open with all of this ancestry DNA stuff.
Right.
So I guess they thought if they ignored it and they didn't talk about it, then it would go away. But
so my question is, what was talk like at the dinner table? So, you know, we're on our honeymoon. You know, it's Carl and Hattie on their honeymoon. They stop with friends. Carl and Hattie.
It's Mr. and Mrs. Humphrey.
Right.
I mean, it's not just Mr. Humphrey.
Right. They have a dinner with the family.
They sit there and pretend that he's not having a relationship with his sister, with Carl's sister. Like,
Right.
I don't know. Anyway, I just find it odd. So
I'm finding it very odd. Like, what is the possible explanation? I think probably maybe it was the friendship between Carl and Gerald that maybe produced the relationship, with Carl's sister, right? I
that
mean, so
that could totally be.
I think they were probably friends first. They were railroad employees, or the whole family was in the railroad. So to me,
Right.
it seems like that's what probably how Hazel came to know Gerald. But
Right.
now to go to their house, and maybe they were invited by Mrs. Humphrey and they just couldn't refuse. They can't. Then what would they say? Well, maybe
Right. And it's hard because we're only looking at this through a certain perspective.
right.
We don't know the whole story.
Right. In the 2020s, we talk a little differently about life happenings and relationships than they did probably in 1930. But still, that was awkward. That was our awkward find for the week.
Mhm.
And we still have kind of just going, huh, like that is really, really strange. And here we go. We're going to, every time I pull out a piece of paper now, it's like, I'm going to spend the rest of my time in December probably going through all those papers again, thinking, what am I missing? There's probably
Right.
more to the stories than we know.
Right. And you might pick up little tidbits that maybe in things that we looked at before
Right.
that might apply to this situation, and we might see it in a new light, and it might bring a little more information to the table.
Right. But this was a weird shock.
This this was surprising. Yeah.
Surprising. I didn't know that was the deal. So we thought we had to bring it to you right away because we just found it yesterday. So just happened to be recording today. So what we're going to do, I think, going forward in December, what we'd like to do is we're going to take a little break, unless, of course, we come up with all kinds of things in Carl's hoard.
Yes.
Then we're going to take a break until January. In January, we're going to start out again with a really, really great story of an Italian immigrant and how things got on here in the United States when he got here, and how 100 years later, we're still celebrating his life. So
That's going to be a really good story. I
that's a
can't wait to
very
dig
good
into
story.
that one.
I don't know. I think some people did DNA, but we didn't need it. But still,
Right.
the story and the discoveries are really, really great.
And reconnecting.
Exactly.
Should we tell people to give their family members ancestry DNA kits?
Yeah. So for Christmas this year, why not give the gift that keeps on giving, which is the ancestry DNA? And if anybody wants any information, that's a great way to know, specifically if you have Irish, Italian, you might even have some Jewish. Like we've seen specks of Jewish in our history before, and I don't have any knowledge of that, but I would like to know. Where would that be? Where would I have had some Jewish ancestry? Because I'd like to know. So I hope everybody, if they get an opportunity, take a test if they like. I did ancestry, but there's many of them, and they're all worthy. They all have a good aspect to them.
Right. And it's almost like Cracker Jacks. There might be a surprise in the box.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to continue on reading, seeing what Hattie and Carl have gotten up to and what they've talked about, or where they went and who they visited. But if we find anything interesting, we're going to let you know. January 11th will be our next podcast. Until then, look for us. You never know. We might pop up with something fun. But our plan is to take a break and prepare and enjoy the Christmas holiday.
Hope you all have a happy holiday, and we'll see you in the new year.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.